Greetings. Dan Best here with Rachel McKinney, presenting 3 decades of Prothonotary Warbler Husbandry, the Upper Cuyahoga River Prothonotary Warbler Nesting Project. Well, an alternate title might be, or 3 decades of prowling the Upper Cuyahoga River. PROW, or P-R-O-W, is the American Ornithological Society's 4-letter alpha code for the Prothonotary Warbler. Prothonotary warblers, referred to heretofore as prothonotaries, are admired and eloquently described for their intense egg yolk yellow color of their plumage, especially of the males. Females are slightly less dazzling, as are the young birds following their post-juvenile molt that comes soon after fledging. Prothonotaries are the only cavity nesting warblers in eastern North America. Like bluebirds, tree swallows, chickadees, house wrens, and others, they are considered secondary cavity nesters. That is, they do not make their own nest cavities, but use such naturally occurring ones as woodpecker nest cavities, knotholes, and the hollow ends of broken snags. Tolerant of humans, these adaptable birds readily use nest boxes and have been documented using an astounding variety of unnatural cavities, even entering buildings, not unlike Carolina wrens, to use minnow buckets, glass jars, coat pockets, shoes, toolboxes, and the laughable list goes on. So where does this name prothonotary come from? Well, if you were to venture across the state line into Pennsylvania during the election season, you would see signs promoting candidates for county prothonotary. Pennsylvania is about the only state in the union that still has this position. Basically, it's a clerk of courts. Most of sources ascribe the name prothonotary as given to this incandescently plumaged songbird to the yellow hoods or ropes worn by the Vatican administrators of the Roman Catholic Church. This reference was or has been attributed to the French-influenced, largely Catholic Creole Society of Louisiana. However, more in-depth inquiry argues for the court notaries of the Byzantine Empire or Roman administrators, also said to wear yellow attire. Regardless, the origin of the genus name Pronotaria is less than clear. The species name, however, is clearly understood, with citria being Latin for citrus, as in the bright golden color of lemons or oranges. If only the American Ornithological Union would see fit to change this bird's name to its old-fashioned common name, the golden swamp warbler, as it's straightforwardly descriptive of the bird in both appearance and habitat. Like other famous denizens of dismal wetlands, prothonotaries are habitat specialists limited to swamps, that is, wetlands dominated by trees and or shrubs growing in or at the edge of standing water. Prothonotaries are even known as swamp canaries in parts of the South. As swamp dwellers, prothonotaries find their main habitat in the river bottomland forests of rivers and swamplands, the bayous, if you will, of the southern states. The northern reaches of prothonotary breeding range extend into the southern Great Lakes region, where true swamp habitat remains. Like many neotropical migrants, they have been declining, mainly due to habitat destruction in their North American breeding range. Prothonotaries have lost swamp habitat to logging and draining of wetlands for agriculture and other developments. Although not classified as endangered or threatened, they are considered a species of special concern, vulnerable to further population decline. Prothonotaries are federally listed as endangered species in Canada. Small, tenuous populations of prothonotaries are found in Ontario, mostly in patches of swamp found on peninsulas or sand spits jutting out from the north shore of Lake Erie. Canadian prothonotaries are threatened with habitat destruction through coastal development, agriculture, and especially in recent years by rising lake levels that inundate remaining swamp habitat. As a neotropical migratory songbirds who make their home in both the northern and southern hemispheres, prothonotaries winter in Mexico, Central America, and northern South America. Coastal mangrove swamps have long been considered the essential winter habitat for prothonotaries. Mangroves are a globally threatened habitat, declining due to coastal development and aquaculture, further threatened with the rising sea levels due to climate change. As presented at the 2020 Ohio Bluebird Society Conference, Dr. Chris Tonner of The Ohio State University and his graduate students have used geolocators attached to prothonotaries to track their migratory travels. They have determined that a key wintering destination for Ohio's prothonotaries are the forests along the Magdalena River Valley in northern Columbia. Following years of warfare between government forces and rebel guerrillas, this region is now threatened with deforestation as settlers clear previously vacant land for farming. However, as a saving biological trait, prothonotaries are very adaptable and readily pioneer new habitats. Prothonotaries have a really interesting history in Ohio. They were first recorded in the 1850s, colonizing the swampy margins of natural lakes that were enlarged to supply water for Ohio's canal systems. These habitats declined by the early decades of the 20th century as lake margins were developed for summer cottages, amusement parks, and boatyards. However, about the same time, prothonotaries took to the swampy edges of flood control lakes built in response to the catastrophic statewide flooding of 1913. In the latter decades of the 20th century, reservoirs were built to supply water to growing population centers, most notably the Columbus area, with the construction of Hoover Reservoir and Alum Creek Lake. With their resurgence in the latter half of the 20th century, beaver also create prothonotary habitat by damming streams, creating swampy wetland impoundments. Ohio's prothonotary warbler populations places scattered populations where tracts of swamp forest remain intact. These principal prothonotary populations include Lake Erie marshes in Lucas, Ottawa, Erie, and Sandusky counties, including McGee Marsh and Ottawa National Wildlife Refuge, Alum Creek Lake in Delaware County, home of Dick Tuttle's prothonotary nesting project, Hoover Reservoir, also in Delaware County, home of Charlie Bombassi's large-scale nest box program, the Scioto River below Columbus, the Little Miami River in Warren and Hamilton counties, Killbuck Marsh, a large wetlands complex, and homes Wayne and Coshocton counties, where there is found the largest population of prothonotary warbler in Ohio. Mosquito Creek Lake in Trumbull County, home of Lloyd Marshall's growing prothonotary nesting project, and our spot, our study area on the Upper Cuyahoga River in Geauga County. Our prothonotary warbler project, the Upper Cuyahoga River in Geauga County. Prothonotaries are found on the river's lower east branch, downstream and below the confluence of the east and west branches to just below the Geauga-Portage County line. This stretch of river has a low gradient flowing slowly over a former post-glacial lake bed. Amid the rolling topography of glacial outwash features, including cames, kettles, and outwash terraces, the old lake bottom serves as the Upper Cuyahoga's floodplain. The flats along the river are largely swamp forest, comprised of silver maple, American elm, green ash, and swamp white oak, interspersed with willows and buttonbush. It was on this lazy stretch of river in Geauga County that naturalist Merritt Skaggs discovered the prothonotary warbler population there in 1947. Early in my tenure as a Geauga Park District naturalist, I was introduced to the prothonotary warblers of the Upper Cuyahoga, encouraged by my mentor, Geauga Park District Naturalist Emeritus Dwayne Ferris, who may be remembered by the longtime older members of the Ohio Bluebird Society. I started putting out nest boxes in 1992. These were installed upstream and downstream of Geauga Park District's Eldon Russell Park that provides access to the Upper Cuyahoga River. At that time, a major reference for aspiring prothonoteers, if you will, was Lawrence Walkinshaw's groundbreaking prothonotary warbler studies in the 1930s and 1940s in Southwest Michigan. Walkinshaw used wooden nest boxes downsized in dimension to about 2/3 that of the standard bluebird box design. Another major reference at the time was a nest box design using 2 milk cartons nested inside each other. And this was used by Lisa Pettit, her husband Dan, and brother Ken for their landmark prothonotary studies in Tennessee and Ohio's Killbuck Marsh. Pettit's study required a large population sample size, entailing a large number of nest boxes. So these milk cartons were donated by a local dairy. Incidentally, Lisa Pettit, after building a stellar resume in migratory bird science and as a National Park Service biologist for the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, was this past year, in 2021, named the park's superintendent. Our nesting project was launched with the aim of increasing the Prothonotary Warbler population along a stretch of the Upper Cuyahoga River, about a 1 mile stretch. We hope to do this by improving the nesting success by overcoming some of the common nesting mortality factors that Prothonotaries experience. I started off using a combination of Pettit milk carton and Walkinshaw wood nest boxes. Both had the same inside dimensions of about 4 inches square and 8 inches high, which closely matched the size of a downy woodpecker cavity. That's a nesting situation favored by Prothonotary warblers. I quickly learned the shortcomings of milk cartons, following Pettit's method of taping them to trees. Falling water levels put the cartons out of reach, and the milk cartons proved to be not predator-proof, as raccoons demonstrated. The wood nest boxes, mounted on metal posts at the edge of the river, also proved difficult to access with changing water levels. By the next year, 1993, I had quit the milk cartons. Instead of mounting nest boxes on metal posts on the bank, I mounted the box on PVC pipes slid over metal or wooden posts. The posts were set in the river bottom to better facilitate monitoring by canoe. It was an improvement, but after getting clunked in the head while lowering the heavy wooden nest boxes for inspection, I began the search for a durable, lighter weight alternative. Voila, Metamucil jars, durable, weatherproof containers, easily converted to birdhouses, and in steady supply from family elders. Converting a 23-ounce Metamucil or similar plastic jar to a birdhouse is simply a matter of using a drill with a hole saw bit to make a 1 1/8 inch entrance hole and then a 1/4 inch drain hole in the bottom. 1 inch ventilation holes are screened with plastic embroidery mesh. The jars are spray painted to mimic the dead wood and mossy and lichened bark of trees. The nest jar is attached to a 5-foot section of 1 1/2 inch inside diameter Schedule 40 PVC pipe with a hose clamp inserted through slits cut in the back of the nest jar. To install the nest jar in the river, a 10-foot, 1 inch inside diameter Schedule 80 that has a thick wall PVC pipe serves as the main post that is pushed into the mud bottom of the river. This 10-foot PVC pipe has a 10-foot metal electrical conduit inserted down through the center of it to provide more rigidity. This metal core lessens the swaying that comes with the uptick in current when the river rises. The nest jar on its 5-foot pipe is slid over the 10-foot pipe and held at the Prothonotary preferred 5-foot height with a set screw that allows for raising and lowering the nest jar in response to water level changes, as well as lowering and raising it for nest inspection for monitoring. As Prothonotaries prefer the shade of the swamp forest, the tree canopy, the nest jar locations are not based on a prescribed distance from each other, but chosen for shade conditions and soft mud to push the nest pole in. Although birdhouses made from PVC pipes are not novel among nest box enthusiasts, apparently the use of fiber supplement jars is or was. Our use of Metamucil jars as birdhouses was widely referenced in a number of scientific papers and publications on Prothonotary warblers. Our use of nest jars spread. Lloyd Marshall has been having great success with Prothonotaries in the wooded coves of Mosquito Creek Lake using commercially sourced plastic jars. Nest Box Authority Dick Tuttle used his ingenuity to build Prothonotary nesting quarters with better ventilation and other improvements. With the switch from wood to nest boxes, or wooden nest boxes to plastic jars, we were concerned about the loss of the insulating properties that wood offers. Then in about 1997, Metamucil became available in a larger 36.8 ounce size jar. So we tested prothonotary preference by pairing the two jars on their mounting poles. For the most part, prothonotary chose the smaller 23 ounce jars with its 3.5-inch diameter over the 36-ounce jar with its 4.5-inch diameter. So what do? Well, we used the larger jar. Why? The extra space allowed us to add a 3/8-inch thick pipe insulation foam as an inside jar lining to provide the temperature buffering quality that wood nest boxes afford. The foam also provided a better toe hold for nestlings to exit the nest jar at fledging. As prothonotary show up on the upper Cuyahoga River by May 1st, we install the nest jars before the end of April. We can't leave the pipes in year-round as winter ice flows would irretrievably bend them underwater. From early May to mid-July, the nest jars are monitored 2 to 3 times a week by us Prothonoteers, as we call ourselves. From the mid-1990s to the late 2000s, our prothonotary partner, Andy Fondrick, handled much of the monitoring. My daughters, Emma and Kate, learned to count objects by counting warbler eggs as 3-year-olds. The Prothonotary Warbler population in our stretch of river has been fairly consistent over the years. Males seem to outnumber females, as there are always males whose mating status goes undetermined.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here and talk about nest progression. Male prothonotary warblers tend to arrive before the females. The previous year's males reclaim previous territories while new males vie for vacant nesting opportunities. Males strike claims. Actually, they stake their claims with the song, and Dan's going to attempt to play the song here.
Okay, let's see if we can get this bird to sing. There we are.
There's their resonating sweet, sweet, sweet song. So they arrive singing on territory, and then they start to inspect cavities and nest jars. To attract mates, the males gather wads of moss to make a foundation for the nest. Females will add more moss, as shown here, if a male didn't use enough to suit her. And the female prothonotaries line the nest cup with very thin strands of bark and other fine rootlets. And this even includes poison ivy tendrils. Once the female lays eggs, these egg clutches range anywhere between 4 and 6 eggs, typically right around 5. These eggs hatch in about 10 to 12 days. And these hatchlings are about 1 inch long and are incredibly feeble. They, however, grow very fast, and they're ready to fledge in as little as 9 to 10 days. As gleaners, prothonotaries pluck a variety of invertebrates, including caterpillars, spiders, moths, damselflies off of trees, leaves, and twigs. Annual mayfly hatch provides a feast of slow-moving, really little sausages for prothonotaries and waxwings, robins, and other birds that join the flycatchers in hawking mayflies out of mid-air. Nest building and incubation stages are most critical time periods for what we deem as wren wrecking. As competitors for nest cavities, house wrens are far and away our main nemesis. Wrens remove warbler nest material or simply build their own stick nests on top of the existing warbler nest. Male wrens fill multiple cavities, including in the nest jars, with sticks to try and attract their mate. Wren raids go beyond home wrecking. Our greatest nesting losses are due to wrens removing clutches of prothonotary eggs, and they are also suspect in mysterious disappearances of warbler nestings from undisturbed nests. Only the most vigilant prothonotary pairs succeed in deterring these persistent raids. Sensing the limits of their nesting season, prothonotaries will re-nest up until about mid-June. We've had instances of 3 nesting attempts by a pair of prothonotaries who were trying to succeed with wren pressures being very significant. Wren damage fluctuates. Some years are not so bad and other years are really horrible. Over 30 years, we've lost 20% of the prothonotary eggs to house wrens. We have not found an effective way to yet deter them. Young are banded at about 1 week old. We use size 0 aluminum bands from the USGS Bird Banding Lab, and these are applied with special banding pliers. If you want further explanation for banding birds, you can visit the Bird Banding Lab website. So we've determined that 7 days is about the ideal age for banding nestlings. By this time, the nestling's leg tissue has gone from fleshy to firm, allowing an applied band to move freely on the leg without constriction. We place bands on nestlings' right legs as preliminary indication that they are returning birds if they are sighted in subsequent years. Since 1992, we have banded over 700 prothonotary nestlings. Less than 3% of these nestlings have returned to our project area as adults. No doubt, first-year mortality claims many. With others, we suspect filling vacancies in other Prothonotary warbler populations. Some of our quote-unquote birds may well be outside the boundaries of our nest project area. After young are fledged, they are tended to by their parents for a couple of weeks. Male Prothonotary's territorial singing wanes in July to be replaced by the incessant feed me calls as the fledglings follow the adults through the swamp forest begging for food. Second broods are not considered common in the northern latitudes of the warbler's breeding range. However, if the first nesting is completed early enough in the season, second broods do occur. In these cases, the male tends the fledged young while the female is incubating her new clutch. In other cases, Prothonotaries change mates for the second go-round. Before mid-September, the last of the Prothonotaries have departed on their migration to the tropics. Predation. By placing the nest jars in the shade of the swamp forest trees, yet avoiding close proximity to overhanging branches, we have virtually eliminated predation by abundant raccoons. The occasional disappearance of nestlings in an otherwise intact Prothonotary nest is still mystifying. Although we haven't witnessed it, wrens as part of their hostile takeovers may remove hatchlings as well as eggs. We have never known northern water snakes to scale the nest jar poles. Get it? Scale. That's a Dan joke. Yet, however, to be witnessed, but worthy of suspicion with single nestling and egg disappearances are woodpecker raids. Turns out that there's documentation of egg and nestling predation that reveal red-bellied woodpeckers as the under-the-radar nest predators. Perched at the entrance hole, eggs and nestlings can be harpooned with the woodpecker's long barbed tongues. Shown is a remarkable photograph of a red belly caught in the act of poaching a pileated woodpecker egg. We have not experienced egg removal and replacement by the nest parasitizing brown-headed cowbirds. A cowbird was what once witnessed looking to enter a nest jar, but flew on after judging the entrance of the hole too small. With vigilance, we have been able to avoid flood losses following major rain events on the river. When waters rise and our set screws to raise and lower the nests, the poles are underwater, we are able to add extensions to the PVC pipes that raise the nests out of harm's way. We are often asked if we have increased the Prothonotary population with nest jars in our stretch of the upper Cuyahoga River. We don't claim that we have. However, we contend that we have improved nesting success by overcoming nest mortality factors of predation, flooding, and cowbird parasitism. In the 30 years of this Prothonotary warbler nesting project, we have had 246 nestings that have produced 1,344 eggs with a hatch rate of 60%. This also takes into account the unhatched and predated eggs. The nest jars have fledged 759 warblers from 803 hatched eggs, giving an overall fledgling rate of 94%.
By 2005, tree swallows had become serious competitors for the nest jars, determinedly squeezing through the 1 1/8 inch entrance hole. They were laying eggs with such minimal nesting material that the eggs would roll around in the nest jars like marbles. We tried various schemes to ease the population. We even once found a tree swallow that took over a Prothonotary warbler nest jar after the Prothonotaries had gotten one of their eggs laid. Well, we left it be to see how it would all turn out. The swallows hatched and fed the warbler. The swallows hatched. They hatched it. They incubated, hatched it, and fed the warbler nestling. But the swallow nestlings apparently overtook the warbler nestling in size, and it didn't survive. So for a few years in the early 2000s, we tried to promote cohabitation with double-decker Cuyahoga cavity condos They worked once or twice housing both species, but usually only tree swallows up top. The setup was also cumbersome and quite top heavy. By way of exclusion, we found that all but the most determined swallows are kept out of the nest jars by adding a second entrance hole placed over but offset slightly from the first, creating an elliptical that prothonotaries can easily negotiate, but swallows rarely can. Two methods for making an offset elliptical. One is to simply glue a plate made from another plastic jar, or add additional overall protection by surrounding the jar with a section of 4-inch thin wall PVC pipe. When the new economy size 48-ounce Metamucil jar became available, we found the best solution to date. By placing the larger nest jars with larger entrance holes in sunny spots as opposed to shady spots, the tree swallows readily used them and largely left the prothonotary nest jars alone. Now, here's a fortunately rare, but horrific problem that we encountered with the very few tree swallows, and fortunately only 2 prothonotaries. And it was this inexplicable and fatal attempt to enter the top of the mounting poles. Now, obviously, stuffing something into the top of the pole would prevent this. Trouble is, anything put in is popped out by the inner post when the outer post is lowered for nest monitoring. Eventually, we devised a method that has since prevented these tragedies by installing pieces of power trimmer cord in a PVC coupling to cap the holes. When the top outer pole is in the raised position, the cord lays across the rim of the pipe to form a crossed barrier. And when lowered, the pole is lowered, the cord gives way, but then drops back into position when the outer pipe is again raised.
So starting in 1996, we began capturing and banding adult prothonotaries. As with the nestlings, adults get their official USGS metal band. Additionally, plastic color bands are placed on the adults to aid in individual recognition. One color is used on the left leg for all birds in a given year, with a variety of other colors used as the right leg band. This gives the various color combinations needed to identify individual birds by sight. To capture the females, we have used a mesh laundry bag to capture them when they are incubating in the nest jar. This requires a stealthy approach, careful not to hit the nest jar pole with the bow of the canoe. Just before reaching the nest jar, one of us stands up in the bow and places the bag over the entrance hole. Most of the time, the female will immediately flush out of the jar into the bag. While standing, the mesh bag is slid over the nest jar and zipped to prevent escape. The nest jar is then lowered. Remove the bag from the nest jar and the zipper it the rest of the way around the jar to secure the bag. Sometimes she really sits tight on the nest, and we're able to prod her out of the jar and into the bag. With the bird in hand, she gets her bands applied to her legs, both metal and color bands. She is then photographed and released. And to date, we have banded 100 females in this using this process. Capturing the males is a little bit more involved. We locate them by song, since they are usually singing on territory. A mist net is strung between 2 poles in a spot free of interfering branches. Mist nets turn virtually invisible against a leafy background. The shadiest spots are sought to avoid sunlight illuminating the net, while also trying to avoid the ever-present poison ivy, rampant as ground cover, and also around the tree trunks. With an iPhone and a Bluetooth speaker, an audio call and a decoy bird are used to lure the male into the net. Playing on his intense desire to defend his territory, males are caught in the net when they go after the decoy. A range of aggression is displayed by the prothonotary males. The mild-mannered males will make several roundabout approaches to the decoy before making a go at their artificial interloper. Occasionally, they are goaded by their agitated mate. More aggressive males immediately charge in and attack the decoy, getting snagged in the process. So far, to date, we have color banded 106 adult male prothonotaries. These are also banded, photographed, and released. With the ability to identify individual adult birds, much has been revealed to us about the breeding biology. First of all, let's talk about longevity. With all of the hazards of long-distance migration, the life expectancy of small neotropical songbirds is about 2 years. In a given year, half or more of the adult birds will return from the previous year or years. We have had 89 of the 206 birds, which is about 45%, return for a second year, but not thereafter. And we can identify these guys by their bands. That number gets increasingly smaller as we move beyond the 2-year mark. Our oldest bird was banded as an adult, and that bird returned 8 years following his first banding year, making him at least 9 years old. In regards to nest site faithfulness, multi-year males tend to return to their previous territories. Multi-year females tend to move around a bit more. Examples of multi-year pair bonding have been documented, more so in the first decade of this prothonotary project. With females displaying less nest site faithfulness compared to the returning multi-year males, pairs having multi-year matings are generally limited to 2 to 3 year pair bondings. A remarkable exception was a female prothonotary that nested in the same general area upstream from Eldon Russell Park from about 1996 to 2002, making her at least a 7-year bird. She had the same mate for 4 consecutive nesting seasons, succeeded by another male for her remaining 3 seasons. When she didn't show up in the May of 2002, her mate paired and nested with another female. However, in early June, she did end up showing up late. Her mate did take up with her and took on double nesting duty. She laid a clutch of 5 eggs. Unfortunately, she was not seen again after mid-June, and 2 dead nestlings were found in her nest jar. Male polygamy does occur among the studied population of prothonotary warblers. Polygamy is defined by us as a male prothonotary having 2 female mates nesting simultaneously in his territory or sometimes in disjunct territories. The standout example of a polygamous male, we'll call him Buzz, as he was distinguished as much by his song, with which the last note was buzzed, as with his identifying color bands. In 1998, he had nests going with 3 females at the same time. Unfortunately, his territorial attention was too divided to cover all of his guard duty posts. Wrens destroyed all of the egg clutches. This demonstrated the disadvantage of polygamy in areas with heavy wren pressures. In the past several years, our prothonotary's riverine habitat has been undergoing changes. The upper Cuyahoga River, with its low gradient, never turns into a raging torrent. However, the river will rise in response to major rain events. A 2-foot rise will send the water out of its banks, flooding the swamp forest. Over the years, we've experienced 4 to 5-foot water level rises in response to heavy rainstorms. Major rain events in May have increased significantly, especially since 2015. Although we are able to keep the nest jars out of harm's way, the prothonotaries have reacted to ever more frequent high water levels in a way that has hampered our ability to monitor their nests. In past years, when the river waters were within their banks or even briefly out of the banks, the majority of nesting prothonotaries rewarded our efforts by opting for our nest jars over the readily available natural cavities. In recent springs, however, the upper Cuyahoga River has often been out of its banks, especially during the early mid-May nest site selection time. Prothonotaries respond by moving back away from the river channel to take advantage of their expanded swamp habitat, where their preference for nesting over water is temporarily met over this expanded area. With more frequent, prolonged episodes of high water, a major tree die-off has also taken place. Even though the swamp forest is comprised of wetland tree species, there apparently is such a thing as being too wet. Silver maple, the dominant tree species of the swamp forest, has died off in large numbers. Subdominant trees are likewise stressed by being inundated while also being assailed by other pathogens. American elms succumb to Dutch elm disease, and the green ash has been decimated by the emerald ash borer. So much standing dead timber at the river's edge may well be another factor in the prothonotaries retreating further back away from the riverbank to meet their preference for shade. Another effect of tree die-off is more sunlight reaching the swamp forest floor results in heavier undergrowth, making a more inviting habitat for the nest-disrupting house wrens. Furthermore, wrens take full advantage of any unoccupied nest jars. Away from the main river channel, prothonotaries have returned to their traditional cavity nesting situations, including knotholes, former woodpecker cavities, broken snags, etc., all which are found in abundance. The dead timber has attracted increasing numbers of nesting woodpeckers, including downy, hairy and pileated woodpeckers, northern flickers, and recently yellow-bellied sapsuckers that use the willows for sap wells. Vacated woodpecker cavities provide increasing housing opportunities for prothonotaries as they are second cavity nesters. By opting for natural cavities, prothonotaries forego the protection from floods and predators afforded by the nest jars. Coincidentally, the last several years has seen a tremendous increase in canoe and kayak traffic out of Eldon Russell Park. While this increase has also increased the noisy human presence on the river, the commotion doesn't really commence until late May, after which the prothonotaries have already settled into their nesting sites. Prothonotaries have demonstrated a remarkable tolerance for the people presence here and elsewhere. Vandalism has been virtually non-existent over the years, luckily. Paddler curiosity for nest jars is commonplace and has led to many gratifying opportunities for interpreting prothonotary warbler ecology and the value of wetlands as wildlife habitat.
So, what's the future of the Upper Cuyahoga River Prothonotary Warbler Nest Project? Well, despite the significant changes to the swamp forest habitat, there are at least as many prothonotaries as ever in the stretch of river where we are providing monitored housing. However, an ongoing trend of greater spring rainfall, as climate change is predicted to manifest itself in Northeast Ohio, will mean less prothonotary warbler use of nest jars as the birds continue to opt for the plentiful natural cavities. Why, one might ask, don't we just put our nest jars away from the river? That's fine while the river is high enough to canoe or kayak to have that access into the swamp forest. But after the water recedes, to monitor birdhouses on foot, we are faced with trying to get around in mud that sucks boots right off your feet while dodging dense growths of poison ivy. Monitoring that can be done in 2 or 3 hours by boat would become an all-day ordeal. With natural cavities defying discovery or denying accessibility, nest monitoring of clutch size, hatch, and fledgling rates is precluded, along with lost opportunities to ban nestlings and females. Coupled with the proliferation of house wrens, we, after our 2021 season, our 30th season, we are drawing this project to an end as practice for the last 3 decades. We contemplate continuing with a small number of nest jars in the prothonotary's last stronghold that house wrens have yet to overrun, seeking out what remains of shaded nest jar sites while promoting a peaceful coexistence between prothonotaries and tree swallows. We also intend to pursue netting and banding territorial males throughout the project area for science. The other incentive for some continuation of our efforts for the prothonotary warblers is to continue to foster this magnificent bird's role as a conspicuous ambassador for wildlife and, by extension, wetland conservation. With their luminescent presence on display to impress people, as close encounters enjoyed by anglers, hikers, boaters, and other people testify, that swamps are more than mosquito-infested wastelands. The Upper Cuyahoga River, a state-designated scenic river, is a haven for dozens of breeding songbird species, along with bald eagles, osprey, sandhill cranes, muskrats, mink, otters, and the many rare and colorful dragonflies and damselflies, all providing watchable wildlife opportunities that amaze, amuse, fascinate, inspire appreciation in people. Experiences that set career compasses with youth, all that hopefully lead to a more secure future for wetland wildlife. So what can the Ohio Bluebird Society members do for prothonotary warblers? Putting more nest boxes in present prothonotary populations. Well, yeah, but habitat protection comes first. We urge the Ohio Bluebird Society to unite with other bird-related organizations to form a strengthened coalition to advance wildlife conservation issues. A debt of gratitude to our prothonoteers over the years, Andy Fondrick, Ann Bagetta, and Rachel McKinney. and how to roll the credits. The end. Please send your questions, comments to us at these email addresses. Thank you very much.